to another episode of the Acknowledge to Action podcast, where we explore the personal journeys that shape who we are and how we navigate life's challenges. I'm your host, Matthew Benko, and today we are exploring the story of Mike Barnum, a veteran who's on a mission to create meaningful change, both in his life and in the lives of those around him. In this episode, Mike shares his military journey, the struggles he faced while transitioning to civilian life, and the role of kindness and community in his personal growth. We'll also discuss the power of building a personal brand, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, and how sports can serve as a powerful metaphor for unity and resilience. Throughout our conversation, we touch on important topics like mental health, political polarization, and the significance of community support for veterans. If you're looking for insight into how to embrace your experiences, find your tribe, and thrive in both your personal and professional life, this episode is for you. Let's get going. Mike, thank you so much for being here on the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation, and it's really awesome to have you here today.
Hey, it's great to be here. Just want to say thanks for what you do. Truly, this is it's humbling to be able to talk about myself and where I've been, and hopefully shine the light for somebody else who might be going through some of the same things.
No, that's absolutely what it's all about. Hearing your journey, hearing your story, because it serves as a means of motivation and inspiration and something we can relate to and connect to in our own ways. So let's get this party started. Let's kick it off. I always ask, one, welcome and appreciate having you here. We connected on LinkedIn a couple months ago, within the last year. And our relationship has evolved, and I'm very appreciative of it. Love the content you're putting out there. Love the motivation you're putting out there. And that is why we're here today. That's how we got connected to hear more behind the scenes. So if you could just start us off, tell us how you got into the military. Tell us about your journey into the military and what your journey's been since you've been out of the military.
Absolutely. I guess it's a bit of a traditional story for a lot of folks, but I'm starting to find out that traditional doesn't really exist anymore. It's such a unique thing these days to say, hey, I'm a veteran, I'm a combat veteran, right? So my journey started really when I was a kid. My dad was in the Air Force. I always say he was smarter than I was, and so was my brother because he was in the Air Force as well. I joined the Army. But, just from a military family, lineage sort of thing, both grandfathers served in World War II. On my mom's side, grandpa was a Marine boxer. And then my grandpa on my dad's side, he actually came out here to San Francisco, to do some things during World War II. So neither one of them went to Europe or over in the Pacific, but, still, definitely present as part of our upbringing. And then my dad, again, got in the Air Force. So it was always like, hey, I kind of would like to do that. I don't know what I want to do, but I'd like to make that part of my story. And, graduating high school was like, okay, I want to go to college. How am I going to do that? I talked to some recruiters, they came to the schools, all that stuff. I said, I think I'm going to go for an ROTC scholarship. I want to go to college some point. So, my dad had, he's from upstate New York. Yeah, that's where I was born. Syracuse University was always near and dear to our heart. And first time I visited there, I was like, holy smokes, this is where I want to go. Turns out mega expensive, right? And so I was like, okay, I need money for college. I want to go to college, obviously, and I want to serve. And so ROTC was like a pathway for all those things. I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And Army was recruiting hard. And I was like, I don't mind being cold, hungry, working hard. It seems kind of cool. Like I could be buff and, all that stuff. And, I was like, I don't want, this is simple mind, right? An 18-year-old, I don't want to fly a plane. So why would I join the Air Force? I don't want to be, I don't want to be, be on a boat. So why would I join the Navy? It was like, yeah, Army, cool. So yeah, that's how it started, man, and then it branched off from there. I was in for 4 years. I catch myself saying I was only in for 4 years, realizing that, geez, like that was the 4 longest years of my life. And I don't want to conflate what ROTC is in college. We can talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah.
With active duty service, so 2 very different things. But that ROTC is a period of indoctrination that leaves its stamp on you one way or the other. Some people take it really seriously, some don't. Some people just kind of look at it like, oh, it's just another college class where we play Army. But for me, it was like, no, this is a lifestyle change that I'm committing to, and for some period of time. And oh, by the way, 9/11 happened my sophomore year of school, and so all of a sudden things became very real, very quick. So,
Mhm.
um, so yeah, that's kind of where it started, and then it's been part of my identity, in corporate America ever since. And so, as we kind of shared before, um, all the folks that I went to school with, folks of our age, are starting to hit that 20-year mark and going, man, what's on the other side? Well, they're going to go through that transition. I've learned a ton of things that I feel like after 16 years of being out, I could absolutely, help folks with, say, hey, here's some things that you might want to go to the VA for. Here's some things that, hey, guess what? You might have been a colonel, you might have been a sergeant major. A lot of people just don't care. They might say, "Hey, thank you for your service," but if you say I was an E4 and I was in for 4 years and I was an E9, it doesn't mean anything to some people, and that cognitive dissonance is really hard to bridge from one career juncture to another. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me, but we can dive into my history or anything else. I like to say I'm an open book, and I have no secrets. I feel like it makes me a little bit unique in that way. Makes interesting conversations too.
Mike, no, that's good. And I like to ask you this because you're currently building your personal brand on LinkedIn, which is really cool to see the evolution of that. But I just want to highlight something and say something to emphasize a few things that you just said. You touched upon a lot of what I call post-military MEPS. It's been a reoccurring theme in the Acknowledge to Action and post-military. MEPS, as most veterans know, we hear MEPS, military interesting processing station, right? It's like some of that was an okay experience. Some of it, there's some wacky stories associated with that. But in regards to what I call post-military MEPS, is mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual well-being. And that's a long-term, forever journey, whether we're in 4 years, 20 years, you name it. There's no metric we have to meet in the military to kind of acknowledge that and embrace that. And I, from what I see of your brand and what you've been doing on LinkedIn and every, because you've been at this service with 16 years approximately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You I'm really interested in hearing what your journey's been like and how you've been managing those components, because I feel like that factors into a lot of what you've been doing and the amazing messages and content that you've been putting out.
Yeah. Let me start with the LinkedIn stuff because this is actually a fairly recent evolution in my life. I picked up on it about a year ago. I had, like many people, had this LinkedIn profile, wasn't doing anything with it. I just kind of treated it like, oh, it's a online resume, so people can see if
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to work or whatever. And yeah, that's part of it. But I started to, some folks, like Tyler Schmoker is like my man, right?
Yeah.
I realized, dude, he's doing something totally different here, and I was like, I could be different too. I could use this as my open journal, and that's generally what I started to do, is say, hey, here's things I think about, and the number one thing that I want folks to know about me is I'm genuinely a kind person. That's genuinely, whatever else we met, maybe we met and we didn't have such a great conversation. That was the one time I got to meet you, and really I've learned to say, hey, that was just a really messy situation, right? And maybe the other person's not a bad person either, but we all deal with conflict, right? And so I realize there's a way that I can help cultivate the brand the right way, and we all have a brand, whether we own that or not. And ultimately, it's all about building kindness into who you are. And I chose that because a lot of times people will say, "Hey, Mike, you're a nice guy," and they'll say it kind of like, "Oh, you know, nice guys finish last." That's kind of how it hits my eardrums. But
Yeah.
then I also embraced it and I said, hey, I got to acknowledge this because it is part of who I am. I genuinely try to be nice, but niceness and kindness kind of rub against each other. Niceness can be like, I'm going to say something you want to hear because, I don't want to tell you the truth, right? I'm going to, be unclear about something that's difficult because, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And that really isn't, it might sound nice, but it's not kind. What kindness is taking it to the next level of, I'm going to have a real conversation with you. It could be something like, hey, I want to give you a hug because that's what you need today. Or you might need a nice compliment or a kind compliment because, I don't know what you're going through in your life, but it might be something terrible and that might make the difference. Or it might be somebody, you're talking to at work and you're having a good logical conversation about a problem solving. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about the hard things, and that's an act of kindness. So I draw inspiration from Brene Brown. They call her America's psychologist. She says the simple words: "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." So that's something that I've embraced and tried to create a personal identity out there on LinkedIn, aside from my professional acumen, so that people can see the full 360-degree picture of who Mike Barnum actually is. So it's been very important to me, and I think it's important if not just veterans, but other professionals who are kind of in different parts of their career do the same thing, right? So, diving this back to like military service and just generally who you are and how you show up. A lot of times, folks just don't understand what serving in the military is or was, or even for me personally, that was even part of my life, right? They meet me now, they go, "Oh my God, I had no idea," and then all of a sudden that becomes out, and now let's talk branding again. You're Army Mike, you're Air Force Matt. Forget about you know being a parent, being active in the community, whatever you do professionally. All of a sudden, there's oh, well, this guy might have seen something or done something, or well, he was in the Air Force, so obviously he was a pilot. Top Gun starts popping in people's heads, and it's like, no, we as veterans have to do ourselves a solid and tell our story. And that's what I love about your podcast and how you show up. You generally seem like a kind person, by the way. And you also seem like you're willing to pull those stories out and help us tell it. And that not only serves me because I feel better, about sharing what I know, but also it helps close that gap and that cognitive dissonance between, what actually military service is. What I'll tell you is like serving in the Army, it's a lot of really dreadfully boring things and then some absolutely crazy things you'd never believe, right? And it's all mashed up into the same experience. I think a lot of veterans will tell you that. At least that was my story. um, so yeah, no, I thank you for the compliments, by the way. I'm really am trying to keep this consistent with sharing my story, but also, giving people that full view of what kindness actually should be, because we need it today. Let's be real. Like there's a lot of difficult issues out there in the world.
Absolutely. I really appreciate and value how you made a distinction between nice and kindness. Whereas almost in how how I just processed it is kindness is a meditated, clear act to legitimately help one another or a group or an organization using honesty, respect, and intent. So I grew up in the 90s. I went to high school in the 90s, and the song, I think Green Day, Nice Guys finished last, I think Green Day. So you had this like message, you had Offspring, you had these songs about like, if you're nice, you're a loser, all that stuff. And in the 70s, ironically, you had Charlie Brown, which was Charles Schultz, right? Who wrote the comic. Kindness was the essence of Charlie Brown. And it may not have always been cool the way he accomplished something, but it was kind of amazing. And it brought everyone together. And that's kind of what I'm sensing here. And that honestly, that's kind of how we connected, and that wavelength that energy you put out. You know how they say like energies attract one another and whatnot. And you're absolutely right. Kindness, based off how you described it, with intent, honesty, having those challenging conversations with the purpose of, so it's to help you and help the situation become better, not to be a critic. If the conversation evolves, some of the things I've been taking away from what you've been sharing on LinkedIn and our time together since we connected is, anytime you're part of a relationship, whether it's a big organization in the military, family, I mean, you name it, one-on-one friendship, I think this is how I see it. We could be one of several things: a contributor, a collaborator, a creator, a critic, or what was the last? I should have wrote this down. But when you take kindness, you're more of that collaborator, you're more of that contributor. And I think, and I know, and I believe that's what the world needs more of: collaboration, and contributing to making the place better, or to help people in circumstances get out of a challenging situation they're in.
You absolutely nailed it. Like, and like, we're coming off the heels. Like, I literally just listened to your cast with Nick Lavery this morning, and I'm like, dude, knowledge bombs just dropping. But he said something that's going to stay with me, and I think it blends in with kindness really well. He said humility is not altruistic. Humility, and he went into real powerful like statements about, you know, humility makes me better, and so therefore it's not altruistic. Being humble allows me to accomplish the mission more capably, and it maybe makes the team better, but ultimately, hey, I'm trying to be humble because I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to improve myself. And being kind has also got that same thing. Kindness does not need to be, and oftentimes isn't, completely altruistic, because yeah, I might say like, hey, let me give you some of my lunch because you look hungry, or let me think of something that might lift up your day, or write something on LinkedIn that might mean something to somebody. But ultimately, there is that growth that's occurring in my network, in my voice, in my presence, and again, like, I'm benefiting from that, and that is deliberate, that is strategic in a way, but
Yeah.
it's not manipulative. It's not coming from a place of, hey, I'm going to say something to get you emotionally wrapped up in this, and then now I'm going to use that, right? That's the essence of what politics does to us.
Yeah.
And I think in talking about division and lack of collaboration, whether you're talking in the government or whether you're talking at work or in your community, we are in our own mini pandemic of that sort of polarized thinking, where suddenly the enemy is the person that votes blue instead of red, or vice versa.
Yeah.
For me, I grew up in a very conservative household. A lot of military families do, but not everybody in the military votes that way. Not everybody stays that way. People change their opinions, and that's okay. Times change. The Republican Party, for example, started with Abraham Lincoln, and folks that had some very radical ideas at that time. So when we think about in that context, it's like, well, geez, anything can change. And and not to really drag politics in this, it's just on my mind that we are on the cusp of what promises to be another sporty election. And what I just wanted to put out there is, hey, veteran, civilian, service member, wherever you've been, we're all Americans. We're all trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Let's just try to put aside some of our emotional ties to some of this. Know it's there, but let's work together. That's what we need. I mean, we can't move forward with half of the world thinking the other half is the enemy, and vice versa. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And then so on that note, no shocker, I'm a centrist. I believe in there's a need for people like myself to use our voice to bring people together, to say, hey, we may not agree on something as hard to talk about as abortion, or gun control, but we got to talk about it, and we got to
Yeah.
talk about it in a way that builds each other up.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's always it's a sensitive subject to breach, because
Mm-hmm.
of the emotional sort of the emotions that come with that. It's just how it is. And I tell you what, if I had to choose a side, I choose the side of collaboration. I choose the side of respect. I choose the side of what's best for our society, what's going to bring us together, not divide us.
Mm-hmm.
In anything, my background is in psychology. I used to be a counselor at the VA, but ultimatums aren't a good thing. It's either if this, then that, like prid pro quo, right? But the only thing I'm picking is kindness, respect, honesty, and intent in building. And we need more of that, Mike. We do, whether it's through these conversations, through active engagement on LinkedIn, to just share our story and to say, this is the what, the why, and the how. So I appreciate that, because it's overdue, and this is, I see this as an opportunity, a time for, whether it's this generation, I don't like to segment generations, but as a society, regardless of what decade or era you're from, think about how we could come together without referencing things that we don't have control over. Focus on what we have control on. It's like, how can I be there for my neighbor? How can I be a better neighbor? Like, half the neighbors, I don't even know their names, and that's on me.
Yeah,
That's just as much on me as it is them as well. It's a collaborate. Like, it takes contribution. It takes that was the last C. Creator, collaborator, creator, collaborator, contributor. When those three things come together, man, great things could happen, as long as the core values are honesty, respect, and purposeful intent, right? I
yeah,
mean, those two things, we could be better there for each other, and that could really set a new wave of making things better. So this is a perfect example of being in the moment, having these conversations without having to go in with a defensive state of mind. You know,
absolutely. Yeah. So I laugh because um, the generational challenges are ever present, right? There's any number of challenges, but let's focus on that one for a minute. We kind of chide our youth, and especially in the military. I mean, that's just a pastime. Like, it's, it was so much harder when I was,
yeah,
in the Army. Back in my day, airborne school was hard, and the one I always joke about is like, oh, this isn't the real Army. It's like, well, ROTC, that's not the real Army. Well, I agree, but where is
yeah.
this real Army? Has it been hiding out at Fort Benning? Like, is it, like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah,
And so,
where's this real army you speak of?
yeah, and like, it's so much harder, but like, think about like what problems we're handing off now to the generation that's joining the military. Like,
Hmm.
recruiting is hard right now because like we haven't done a great job of taking care of each other, as veterans and as as a country. Like, that's a real problem, and a lot of young people go, you know what, kind of going to pass on the whole military thing. I talked about my family lineage here. Would not surprise me at all if it stops with my kids and my brother. My older brother has two kids as well. I don't think any one of them has any interest in serving. And part of me is like, okay, cool. Like, I'm giving you the opportunity to choose whatever you want to do for my kids, right? But like, it also is kind of sad because it's like, like, I'm not going to encourage them one way or the other to do, join the military. And my dad didn't put a strong hand in that either. He just kind of let us know that, hey, like, you want to go to college, you got to pay for it. You got to find a pathway. And so that was as much of a push as he gave me. And then he tried to push me towards the Air Force, and then I said no, right? So,
Yeah.
being the rebel that I am, I guess. But yeah, so bringing people together, and here's where I think it's really important that for anybody who's not veteran affiliated or not really connected to the military in any way, veterans tend to be extremely candid, compared to normal society. And there's some good and bad that comes with that. Like, one thing as part of the Veterans ERG where I work, employee resource group, um, I said, first of all, we are not like the alt right, voice of, the DEIB movement, right? For
Hmm.
lack of a better term, DEIB stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, something I believe in. But people saw January 6th and they go, look at all those paramilitary wannabes. Like, a lot of them are probably veterans. I said, hey, we are not that. I am not that. I don't stand for that sort of behavior. Some people in the veteran community do, right? So, like I said, some people think one way, some people think another. We can all learn from every one of those perspectives, whether we agree with them or not.
Yeah.
Don't cancel them. Use your voice of candor to share what you know. But in my personal experience, I go, hey, I'm going to share something that I think I know, and I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong and there's good evidence to show that, I'm going to be happy that I learned, oh, I'm glad I'm not making that mistake anymore. And I
Yeah.
think it takes a heart of humility and kindness to be able to have that sort of reflection. And it takes deliberate effort. Most often than not, we get so wrapped up in our sources, our technology, our experiences, and we don't open ourselves to, hey, there's a totally other side to this story with the exact same facts behind it. You
Mm.
two people can see the exact same situation and come away with two completely different interpretations of what happened. So that's kind of what's behind some of my thinking and reflecting on my own experiences through having been in the military, having been to Iraq, and then bringing that into the corporate space, starting a family, and how that's influenced, everything since then. Um, and it's good. It's got good stuff, and it's got some not good, so good stuff, right?
Yeah. You bring up some great points. I want to reference something real quick before as our conversation evolves. And I want to go back to Charlie Brown again. There's a book I often read to. I have two boys. I have two young boys, 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. As of the date of this recording of this podcast, right?
You're in the thick of it, my friend. You are, like easier days are coming. I can promise you that. But those are fun days too. So cherish them for everything they
Oh,
are.
I love it. Maybe because I'm a little bit older. I was in my late 30s when I first had my kids. So I was more receptive to that feedback. It goes by quick and whatnot. So I do cherish those days because it is fun. And part of that is reading consistently and daily. And I've always liked Charlie Brown. I like Snoopy. But there's a book. I don't know the title. I'm going to take a picture of it, and it's going to be a screenshot that's going to be incorporated into this episode, whether it's on LinkedIn or on the YouTube channel. But the message in this particular Charlie Brown book is be kind, be brave, be you. And that just really is a powerful message, and that's what comes to mind with this, what we've been talking about so far. Just be kind, be brave, because what you just talked about, Mike, is you have to be brave to do that, to have that candor, to share your point of view, to share your perspective, and especially with a group that may counter that or may not be receptive to it from the start, from the jump. But having that braveness fueled by kindness and by being you, the authentic you, that's going to lead to dialogue. That's going to build those bridges. That's going to knock down those barriers and those obstacles that we've become. I'm generalizing, but as a society, it seems like we're focused more on the obstacles to prevent us versus, wait, yeah, that exists, but what can we do to overcome that? What can we do to build those bridges and knock down those walls of those, the obstacles and all that too? So bravery is a big part of it, getting uncomfortable. And yeah, I just wanted to share that and highlight as I'm listening to what you're saying and all that. It's really,
Yeah. Well, as you say, you were two peas in a pod here. I loved as a kid reading the Sunday funnies. So
yeah,
it was always Calvin and
Sunday
Hobbes.
funnies. I haven't
That
heard
was
that in a
number
while.
one. Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes. Still read it.
Yeah.
Still breaks my heart that he walked away from his comic strip. Bill Watterson. It just amazing. Like writing.
Yeah.
But then respect. But I read Garfield. I didn't find it as deep, by any means. But then Peanuts is absolutely a keeper. And I watch it with my kids, like every Halloween, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. We watch, because it gives the purpose behind these holidays, and it's a pure message, no matter what you believe or what creed you follow. I think that the rooted in kindness and being brave is two things that I've picked up on to say, hey, this is something that's unique about me that can be a light for others, and it also can be something that helps me. Again, it's not totally altruistic. Like, I'm putting a message out there because it actually helps me get through my day too, and to say, hey, I'm not keeping all this bottled up anymore. If I have all these deep thoughts and it inspires one person to have a better day or think better about themselves
Yeah.
or a situation, then it was worth it. Even if somebody, like 10 people, come back and say, Mike, you're full of it. That's the one thing I'm
Yeah.
waiting for, is for someone to
Well,
come out and say, you're such a poser. And I go,
well, that speaks to the critics. So those are the
yeah.
critics in that transactional exchange. You're
Well,
going to
so
have them.
let me get real serious for a second. I'm wearing my Buffalo Bill shirt because, got to represent, right?
Yeah.
Um, we are gluttons for punishment. I guess funny. I have great conversations with all of our rivals. One of my friends that's she's actually looking to get in the Marine Corps as an officer. She's a Patriots fan, right? And I think number one, Patriots, what a cool mascot. They've also
Yeah.
got kind of the red, white, and blue theme going on. Hated them for years. Just hated them. But eventually was like, you know what? Me hating on Tom Brady is just hurting me. It's not it's not
Yeah.
changing anything. Just respect and like go, you know what? It's their time. And we have this same sort of mini rivalry with the Kansas City Chiefs right now. It's like, okay, you've got our number, you're dominating, but my whole point for bringing it up is number one, gluttons for punishment. We've been through some things as a fan base, and how does that relate to life? Well, I'm not going to hate on somebody because they root for the arch rival team. I'm actually going to appreciate our relationship so much more. And we can have, intelligent banter about, teams. But if I just go, well, I'm going to cancel that person from my life because, they're a Red Sox fan, I'm going to go, yeah, I'm missing out on something because that rivalry makes me such a much better Yankees fan. I know I just flipped from football to baseball, but it's a
Yeah.
glorious time of year for these sort of sports, and it's a way to connect hearts and minds and say, oh, you know what? I'm pretty sure that there's somebody in my fan base that believes completely opposite, sort of philosophy than I do. But we're still part of the same fan base, just like we're part of the same country, just like we're part of the same community, and we're connected whether we like each other or not. We can still be
Yeah.
decent to each other. So yeah, like I think that's the message I'm trying to get out there, because that polarization factor, that all or nothing mindset. Number one, it's a cognitive disorder. It truly is. I've been deep into like the therapy and the mental health, practices, and we bring that into the professional space all the time, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't belong there. It really, truly does not. And if we treat every relationship, every difficult issue like we're watching the Super Bowl and it's my team versus the other team that we hate so much, you know, that's just a really immature way to go through life. And so using sports is a great way to bridge into difficult situations. Say, hey, you know what? Bad game, but at the end of it, I hope everybody shakes hands. I hope, we don't just spend all our time blasting the refs, and that, we just look forward to the next thing and go, well, just going to be that much better the next time we get hit with a difficult challenge.
I love the sports metaphor. We could go on for hours with that. I mean, I love that the direction. Sports is such a critical part of our society, and if we pull back the layers, there's a number of different reasons. It's a form of entertainment? Yes. It's a form of bringing people together? Yes. It's a form of healthy rivalry? Yes. Sportsmanship, all that stuff. There's so much wrapped into sports that we could take away when we take a step back and say, yeah, of course I want my team to win. It feels good to win. It feels to be part of that winning team. But also too, it's like, hey, this is beyond my team and just beyond my immediate dopamine hit need to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's there's a connection here, there's a camaraderie here. And that could be said about any organization and society we're a part of. And going back, I know you referenced the last podcast when Nick Lavery talked about humility and how it's not altruistic, it's more of a tool. And I mentioned that it's a tool to put in our life hack toolbox, right, to make us better people.
Mm-hmm.
And most things, whether it's close personal relationships that we choose to be in, or that we have to be a part of because we're part of an organization, et cetera, and so much more, transactional. Everything comes down to a transaction. And
Mm-hmm.
when we see it that way and we manage it that way, we could be better. We could incorporate kindness into it, because the return on investment is, I feel good. I like doing this. There's some value in it. I'm helping this person. And that return, if that transaction means it just makes you feel a little bit better, great. There's nothing superficial or selfish to that at all. Or if it's more like we go to the store, here's my money, here's my means to pay, I get a good, boom. That's what we think of transaction. Well, at least that's what I thought of for a while. Transaction, okay, it's more of an economy based driven thing, which it is. It's a big action part of the
Yeah.
economy part. But I think everything can be traced back to transaction, or even more on a binary level, input output. Okay, what's my input? What do I need to be a better person, to be present in the moment, to be XYZ, whatever the situation calls for, or what you bring to the table, being your authentic you based off kindness and being brave. Then boom, if that adds value to the situation and enhances the transaction, that's win-win. That's win-win. But
Mm-hmm.
that takes a lot of work. That takes a heck of a lot of work and adjustment, and some days where we miss the mark. Heck, we don't even get close to the target sometimes. But rebounding and having our own core values helps us recalibrate. And that's the power of what you're saying here. Be kind, and looking at it from the perspective of, hey, let's see this as an opportunity, not as a aggressive exchange, or you have to pick sides.
Absolutely. So like, the word transactional. I love how you brought that up, because let's be honest, when we're working in corporate America, right? If you have a corporate job, it is transactional, right? It is the
Mm-hmm.
definition of transactional. You may be in a management culture where you're paid a salary and it's like, there's some gentlemen's agreements together, or you might go into a job where you're compensated by the hour. And if you work over 8 hours, you're going to start incurring premium time and you earn vacation benefits. You get a paycheck at some point. That's a business transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, let me talk about more directly about transitioning. Like, my friend Steven Schultz, by the way, hopefully he listens to this, since I just dropped him in here. Air Force guy.
Okay.
He's an EMT now. We're about the same age. We've connected at work, and just a great human. He says, he goes, Mike, when you decide to do something, you go in both
Yeah.
feet in, like you're in it. So like, one thing I just completed was my first half Ironman, right? And he's just like, hey, that's awesome, like you just decided to go for it and you did it. And I was like, yeah, that's actually something that also I picked up from the military. And there's actually a double-edged sword that comes with that, right? So going into post 9/11 military, I don't care what branch you were in, you served in that time. It was a crazy time. It's still crazy, but like, going right in, like, after, on September 12th and beyond, just, my hat's off to anyone,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you did. I know that, like, there's a sub thread of folks that we kind of rip on each other, between the services, or like in the Army, it's like the infantry guys, they just kind of look at anybody who did anything else was just support. That's it. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's again, all or nothing thinking. But, I go in and I go, you know what? I know what I did. I know what I didn't do. And anybody who did anything and raised their right hand did something more than those that didn't. And that deserves a tremendous amount of respect. And we as a veteran community need to lift each other up wherever we run into each other, whether it's, on a digital platform, whether it's at work, or whether it's, in our communities. However, like for example, something I'll do is if I see a veteran, who maybe it's a Vietnam veteran, the quintessential image of a man sitting in a wheelchair with a scraggly beard and like the, old fatigues, like I'll walk up and I will not say thank you for your service. I'll just shake their hand. I'll say, I appreciate you.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for who you are. Right. Or something, try to come up with something unique, or ask
Yeah.
them a question like, hey, where did you serve? And like, to me, that's something we as veterans we can do to help lift each other up. One thing that I've noticed in the professional space that we need to do a better job with is I've seen veterans who do extremely well to transition out of the military. They raise up to like the manager, VP, chief of staff, whatever you. They don't celebrate their military background. You don't know that about them until you do some digging, most of them anyway. And
Yeah.
most of them are not reaching back down to pull the next one up. And I go, man, that's a failure. And I know why that exists, because there's a stigma that sometimes comes with being a veteran in the workplace, that you go, hey, I've got to separate that part of myself from what I'm trying to become now, because it doesn't matter. And the reality is, who you were then matters just as much. You have to honor that. Not, and if you don't just do it, if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for the next guy, because
Yeah.
they need that hand up. Something that I noticed in our metrics, is, we tend to do pretty well hiring veterans many places, but are we thriving? How can we thrive and build into some of the things that we learned and not kind of shun that part of our existence in making it an obscure sort of artifact, right? It's just, how do we make that relevant? That's up to you and me, right? We're here helping the next generation, whether we do that deliberately or not. We should be. So on that note, like, one of the darker sides of who I am and who many veterans probably are is that, yeah, we committed to something that was bigger than ourselves and we went all in on some level. And when we bring that into the corporate space, sometimes that all or nothing, that going all in, can be detrimental to who you are as a complete person. So I got into a phase in my life where it was like, okay, blinders on. I need to learn about the pipeline industry. I need to learn everything I can because it's what's serious and important. It's what's going to feed me and my family. And I did really well with that. People were really impressed with what I was able to do. But I was doing it to the tune of 80, 90, 100-hour weeks like I was doing when I was in the Army. And when I rolled that out there, people don't believe me. Like, no, actually, I showed up to the job site and I didn't leave for 3 days. I sat in my truck, got a couple hours of sleep, cup of coffee, back at it. And people who have done this understand this. And I realize now, as an older guy, like, that was a disservice to me, to my wife, to my kids. I wasn't getting paid more. I was learning a lot and feeling like a sense of accomplishment. But at the end of the day, it's just a transaction, like the company I work for, gained, and I helped the men and women that I worked with. Great. But this isn't the same level of service that you need to put on anymore. The better solution is to do your 40 or as close to it to the best of your capable self can, and then take that extra, because we blew up the 40-hour week when we were in the military, right? There was nothing even close. Use that extra energy, that drive, to build something that's meaningful to you and your tribe. Maybe it's building a community. Maybe it's a side hustle. Maybe it's volunteer work. Maybe it's everything. Maybe it's being the best father, being the best husband you can possibly be. But nobody teaches you that in corporate America. Nobody teaches you that when you transition. You have to pursue those things deliberately. So yeah, not just dumping on myself here, but like, it's a reflection that it's taken me years to come to, and for somebody who's lived in that service mindset for years and years and years, I think it's going to be a lot harder for them. Decades, effectively. You're at 21 years, I think, right? And it's a lot harder to leave that part of yourself behind and say, okay, let me just put it all in on the line for, Acme Manufacturing or wherever I'm going next.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe that's just a unique Mike Barnum thing, but I see a lot of veterans struggle in this space, and they kind of go, why am I not thriving? Why am I not getting the things that I want? That I really didn't deep into my soul, that I thought were going to come to me now that I have been able to hang up my boots. Right.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much going on up here right now that I'm trying to process in the moment.
I might be like slightly over caffeinated. Like I said, Ariel Resupply, amazing coffee. So I know
with that new Hercules roast. Love the new Hercules. I haven't tried it yet, but it's on order. That's the blonde roast. But Hercules C1. Big shout out to Ariel Resupply for their amazing coffee line and what they do. What Mike does as with this coffee company, but the fact that he has a Hercules brand now, I'm a C130 guy. So
it's funny. I actually, it's total dog leg here. I don't think I landed in my first C-130 until I was in Iraq, because I went to airborne school in the Army. Don't get me wrong, airborne school wasn't the most complex, hard thing ever. It was just like, you feel part of like this community of people who have done that, right? It's kind of cool. But, I was thinking about that a couple of days ago. Is like, yeah, for a long time, I actually jumped out of more military aircraft than I actually flew in. And my dad would always joke at me. He goes, yeah, you jumped out of perfectly good airplanes. I don't get it, And I'm like, So, but yeah, no, I know some of this stuff comes rapid fire, and some of this stuff with transitioning, it's really hard, and you don't expect it to be, because you go, nothing could be as hard as what I've been through. Nothing can even compare. And on a lot of levels, that's true. Like I work in a lot of crisis and post-crisis type environments, and I remind myself, a lot of the work that is going on is the defining work of someone's career right now. And I've already been there. I've already had some of this defining work, all throughout my career. And for somebody, this is their first time dealing with something that is like catastrophic, for example.
Yeah.
And the mindset that comes along with that, the mental health challenges as much as the physical and the emotional parts of it. It really, truly is something where you have to dig into that deep well of maturity and say, hey, I've been here. And, we all have our weak moments. I've had my weak moments. I'd had panic attacks at work because I didn't realize I was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Didn't even know. Like, totally wrote that out of my DNA. I was like, got 10 fingers, 10 toes. Yeah, I don't have any purple hearts or anything like that. Like, it doesn't exist in my world. And, I've got some things that I got to talk about, but so does everybody. So I'm just going to dump all my energy into work. Like I'm always have a couple beers and then come back tomorrow and start the next thing. And I realized, boy, that's a really bad, way to, medicate yourself. So anyways, been on a journey there too.
Well, I don't know if I said this in a previous podcast, but obviously this is acknowledge to action, right? The power of acknowledgement and all that stuff. And that usually comes from within and from the self. But I was talking to a fellow veteran a couple of weeks ago, and something came up, and he was acknowledged by the VA for a particular, I think it was PTSD. And I just said something, I was like, the power of validation is amazing.
Absolutely.
Whether you internally validate it, but sometimes we need validation more often than not comes from an external source. We acknowledge, we start a process and a path of recovery, but validation is something incredible. And going back to what you said earlier about bringing, being your authentic self and being a veteran and bringing those incredible experiences and values and skill sets, whether they're obvious, tangible, depending on what MOS or AFSC or I think Navy's rating, well, whatever you did in the military, there's incredible stuff you bring to the table. Some things we got to work a little bit harder, but that's challenging because we're not really set up for us to, we have to experience that and understand that. And by the time we get it could be 10, 15, 20 years later before we're able to articulate that. My point in saying all that is the power of acknowledgement and validation. It has to start. We have to get our story out there. We have to acknowledge things we're struggling with, things where we need help figuring out. Then the validation part comes in. So that helps us find value in ourselves. And what we put out there, I think sometimes we put out some feelers to identify what is my value now as a veteran. Is it going to be received? Is it going to be validated? Great. If that's a one shot and you hit the mark, great. There are success stories out there like that. But more often than not, just in my own experience, having talked to veterans over the years and being part of that, actively part of that community, it takes a lot of trial and error to get there, to find 100%. Your value, to find your tribe, to you able to articulate that. So whoever's listening, if you're struggling, hang in there. You have to be brave. Going back to what we talked, be brave, put yourself out there, and you're going to have your critics. You're going to have your folks who just don't understand you in the moment. But you putting it 100%. Out there is almost like not a rehearsal. It's far from a rehearsal, but it's you putting those reps in. I've been a load master. I've seen plenty of jumpers jump out of the parachute door for the first time. And I wish I could take some video, but the last airborne course I was a part of as a load master facilitating people jumping out of perfect good airplane. On jump 5, it's amazing to see that confidence, to see that value in themselves. Like that first one, of course, who wouldn't be like, what? All right, I'm on the static line and go. Like you're overwhelmed. But a couple of days later, when you get jump number 5, it's like, yeah, I could do this all day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that for everybody, but to see that progression, and even speaking from a C-130 loadmaster, the first time you open those parachute doors for the jump master, it's like, whoa, like, and then it's like, it's all right, just take it all in, but get those jump platforms out, get that jump master and the safety in, and then it gets fun, it gets exciting, that then you look forward to those opportunities, and when, where, and how to be yourself, be your authentic self, and from there, the value, there's no limit to that. So that's just wanted to
I
share that.
There's so many, man. You're dropping so many crumbs here. Like I could just pick them all up. Like I just let's talk some of the challenging matters of showing up in a corporation. Right. I work in the electric utility industry. I've worked in oil and gas. Energy is what defines me. If I mentioned, like, people be like, "Oh yeah, so you jumped out of planes?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I was a 5 jump chump." But then I go, why am I diminishing that for them?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. I'm gonna say, look, I wasn't special ops, not even close, right? But I won't embellish, because let's be real. There's a lot of us in the veteran community that will, embellish every story they can,
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, we do. There's a sense of, like, humility that isn't actually misplaced. Like, we won't actually emphasize the level of challenges because we don't want to be one of those guys that boasts about things and it's just totally not true, and then somebody's going to call us out, right? We just, like, the whole stolen valor thing is real, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be one of those people, right? But like, yeah, like being able to validate yourself and say, yeah, no, I've got this condition that has affected millions of veterans over the years. We're starting to understand it better. I need help. It's not that I'm broken. It's not like I'm this damaged toy or like some, incapable human. It's like there's this deep, profound piece, though, that needs professional attention, and that shows up at work. It shows up in my relationships, and I'm passing off the burden onto others. The more days I go by, and I say I'm not going to work on this, and so also as part of my growth, I've been very candid about what I've experienced and what I've sought to get help, so I can hopefully be the light for another veteran, even our civilian brothers and sisters who might be struggling, saying, "Hey, thanks for using." Like, people have told me, they say, "Hey, thanks for destigmatizing this, and it's empowered me to go and get the help that I need, whether it's through the VA, whether it's through your medical care at your company, or what
Mm-hmm.
have you." Um, it's not easy. It's not easy things. It is extremely hard to get into the system, whatever it might be. It's extremely hard to get respect from your coworkers and your bosses, because it might look like, hey, I'm trying to flake out of work a little early today. But ultimately, the payback is so much better. You're so much happier. You're so much lighter,
Yeah.
and that's so much better for everybody else around you. I wish we could we could do so much better with that. So there's obviously some huge voices on LinkedIn that we're connected with, like Greg Van Dyne's like the ultimate when it comes to it. He's always putting out a positive message, and he's always doing his part to destigmatize, because he's had his own dark times too. And we can
Mm-hmm.
all lean in and draw from that strength, whether we had the exact same experiences as those guys or not. And I love the fact that that's becoming more normalized, because we need that. And we can also be that beacon for other coworkers that are going, what, man, that was a pretty wild emergency, and I don't know if I'm right. Or, did you realize that somebody pulled a gun on us on that job, because they didn't like what we were doing? I'm like, yeah, we have people that don't like us, right? And that can leave folks traumatized. And a lot of times
Yeah.
people start going tit for tat for trauma versus trauma. It's like, hey, trauma is trauma. We all process it differently. We all see the world a little bit differently. And if somebody is struggling, they need the help to process that trauma in a healthy way, because they're going to choose something that may not be the best thing for them. Again, I've made my mistakes. Like, I'm not saying I was an alcoholic, but I realized, hey, me having a couple beers after work really not doing anything to help my relationship with my family, and it's really not helping me as a person grow into who I ultimately want to become.
Wow. It all starts with that acknowledgement, and whether it's through
Absolutely.
social media, and obviously we're living in a digital era that gives us so many access points. Some
Mm-hmm.
are great, some are okay, some not so great, right? So finding those great resources that empower us, that are, and I'll go back to the honesty, kind, respectful ways to help us acknowledge, because if we don't acknowledge, we can't get to we can't get to that source that's going to validate, that's going to lead, that's going to build our toolbox to help us manage our particular circumstances, whether it's an isolated experience, say at work, where it was a, I don't want to call it temporary trauma, but a trauma enough to where you have to process it. You have to process that. I don't I don't know if I really went over this in previous episodes, but acknowledge to action. Well, what's in between the action? It's accept,
Mm-hmm.
process, plan, action. We need those steps, and that's been my version of my own experiences going through the challenges I've had over the years. Using, there's so many good models out there, behavioral health models, cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing
Mm-hmm.
therapy, so many different things. We have to find what works for us, but we have to acknowledge, we have to be the one who owns it, who recognizes it, and is like, okay, I need help. And some of us need a little more of a support system to get us to that source that's going to take us through our progression of empowerment.
Yeah, and yeah. On that note, the acknowledgement for me, and I think this is an acknowledgement many people have to come across. I think there's even a book about this now. It says, "No one's coming to save you. Like
Yeah.
you have to do this. No one else is going to do it for you. You have to acknowledge where you struggle and where you need help, and where you're doing well. And when you're doing well, again, it's not for you to go out on the rooftops and brag about it. It's for you to
Yeah.
help lift others up. And that's where I kind of shout up to the folks that have risen, veterans especially, to the influential parts of our society. Like you're the exception, you're the true exception. Like most people who have been in a war in any capacity are struggling with that at some point, and it's holding them back. And they have to, they need their mentors. They need the medical
Hmm.
help. They need the mental help. But it all, for as you and as an individual, you also have to accept that, hey, this situation may not be fair, but it is the situation you have, and you have to deal with it. Like you have to take responsibility for that. I think Nick even also talked about that. It's like, man, I'm going to tell you, in corporate America, I have been dealt some blows, and I talk about it. And I guarantee you, there's somebody on the other side that was at the upper level going, Mike, that's not how it was. And I'm going, but that's how I lived it, And if I just keep it bottled up, number one, it doesn't help me anymore. I have to process it. But the reason I'm sharing is not to make anybody feel bad. It's actually somebody else is dealing with that exact same situation right now, maybe in the same exact organization. And we have to find a way to share those hard stories in a way that says, yeah, this is really humbling. I didn't really want this, but it happened. I didn't like getting demoted more than once. I didn't like getting laid off, but these things happened in my corporate career. I never would have expected that. Following a really strong career in the Army, I never expected that PTSD was going to show up in 2020. Of course, 2020 gave us a lot of things we didn't expect, but
Hmm.
this is where, like I want to just throw again a shout out to the folks who have embraced the different tools that we have today to bring it forward, because again, it's not easy. And wherever they are, they've all helped me to cultivate my voice. And you're doing the same thing. You're helping me share part of a story that I'm hoping will help somebody else. So the thing I always leave with is like, hey, maybe we're not connected, maybe we are. If you're having a rough day, just drop me a note. Like if you ever want to, I'm always down for real conversations. Loving that part of being involved on a public platform. So um, yeah, that's my story, and or at least part of my story. And I'd love to be able to be that light for anyone else who needs it.
Mike, thanks. And I always ask on the tail end of our conversation, like, what advice do you have for anybody? This platform goes beyond the veteran, right?
Of
Because
course.
we're all human beings, and we all have our struggles with transition and our journey. And what you just said on the tail end was some great advice. How can you package that up? Please provide us some parting words for some advice for those that may be currently experiencing some challenges with their journey, wherever they may be in their journey, and some words of advice you have for them to give them the motivation and the bravery they need to get through it.
I would say this here it is. Find your community, find your tribe, whatever it is. There's a lot of negativity out in the world, And if it's not serving you, don't be a part of it, right? If you realize like, hey, somebody's not who I thought they were, don't let them hang around your life, because ultimately they're going to influence you in a way that you can't control, right? You can control you though, and you want to surround yourself with a community that lifts you up, whatever it might be. For me, particularly, I've realized, again, it's taken me almost 15, 16 years. Actually, I probably realized this a few years back. It's veterans. The veteran community is there to lift each other up. And if you're not, there's other veterans, like you could be at, like I said, there's the veterans employee resource groups at large corporations like where I work. There's the VFW, American Legion. There are any number of service organizations out there. There's the VA. But don't give up. If you had a bad experience with one of them, there's many, many, many more out there. If you're not a veteran, I'm sure those organizations would love to have you anyway. They'd love to have your perspective. You just love veterans. I think they'd embrace you back. I think that's something that you could look at. But if there's something that speaks to you more directly, I'm sure there's a community out there that is willing to embrace you. And I think if you reach into there, you'll figure it out. It's what's the old saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Like,
Yeah.
no one does this on their own. No one.
No.
That's the thing I wish I would have learned, back in 2008 when I got out.
That's great advice. And it speaks to, I always come up with the titles during in the moment with the conversation, but this episode I like to title "Be Kind, Be Brave, Be You." I think it's very fitting for our episode. So, but that's obviously going to be determined when I'm producing this and all that. But part of being brave, what you just said, to do that, you have to be brave. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to put yourself out there, and that's not easy. And we get that. We understand that, and that's okay. But you have to challenge yourself to work up to that bravery. You have to put yourself out there in a way that you acknowledge that's going to help you build that team, reinforce that, and most importantly, find that value. And because it's out there, we all have that. We all have that inside of us. We all have incredible gifts that some are dormant, and some it's obvious to others sooner than later. But just be kind, be brave, be you, and that will help.
Well,
And I really appreciate this
I love, I
conversation we had.
love, I love that title, and I hope you use it because um, if my dad gets to listen to that, I know it'll light up his life because he loves Charlie Brown. Loves the stories and things. So hope it's something we can go with. I know you're into music and you love knowing what theme song or whatever I'd like to roll
Yes,
with. So
please.
I just want to drop this one on you. There's this band that I've only recently discovered called Balkan Beatbox. They've got a
Okay.
really awesome sound. I'm on Peloton all the time, and I learned it from one of the instructors. He dropped it in there. I'm like, wow, these guys are wild. So the song is actually called No Rush. And it's actually a
No
very
rush.
chill song. A lot
Okay.
of their stuff's really wild. This one's actually really chill, and it is definitely worth a listen because it definitely, me being an active guy, I get going really hard, really fast sometimes. Like my friend Steven said, when I decide to do something, I go. And then that it's a good reminder to say, hey, we got time. We got time. Take it one step at a time and you'll get there.
Nice. What's the name of that band again?
It's called Balkan Beatbox.
B as in Bravo. B.
Yeah, I'll shoot it to you. I'll make
Okay.
sure. Yeah, it's rad though. There's a couple other songs that they're out there, but that one really speaks to me because of all the long journeys that we're all on. We guys got to accept. Hey, it's going to take time. Follow the
I love that.
process.
I love hearing new music, and that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to hearing that song, and it really is going to take on a new meaning because it's going to complement this amazing conversation that we just had. So, Mike, I can't thank you enough. I look forward to staying connected with you, staying engaged with you, and just really being kind with you, being brave with you, and just being our authentic selves. This is awesome.
Totally. This has been great. And again, I'm humbled. And if there's anything I can do to help you and your journey, I'm a brother. I'm a friend. And yeah, I'm here.
I'm going to take you up on that transaction.
Absolutely. All right, man.
All right, Mike, until next time, man, take care.
All right. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mike Barnum and found value in his insights on personal growth, mental health, and the power of kindness in today's world. As we've discussed, transitioning from military service to civilian life comes with its own set of challenges, but with awareness, authenticity, community support, and personal resilience, it's a journey of empowerment and transformation. Remember, building your personal brand and staying true to your values can open doors, while surrounding yourself with people who lift you up can make all the difference. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. And as always, if you or someone you know is navigating similar challenges, reach out. Community and acknowledgement are key to moving forward. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and keep pushing toward your own personal growth. I'm Matthew Benko, and this is Acknowledge to Action.